Okay, so in this segment, I'm going to talk about BEK children. They're known as the black-eyed children, black-eyed kids, BEK. And this is going to be coming from my own experience as well as some experiences from people that I've read that had written about it. And just some that stuck out more than others, so I'm going to talk about that. First, before I talk about my experience. So before I did this video, I looked online on YouTube to see if there are some other people who had their experiences. And on YouTube, there wasn't any. There wasn't anyone who had a personal experience. They were compilations of other people's experiences that they collected and made into one, and they would talk about it as like the 100th person, or not the first person, okay, basically. And let me just talk about what I remember, what I recall that were interesting things that I've read. So there was one lady who had been abducted. She had been abducted often, constantly, so much that she kept a journal, and she had a website about it, in which she talked about her experiences. And in one of her experiences, and she said she's not afraid of them. She's not, because she's so used to being abducted that she's not afraid. But there was one time when she had gotten on the ship, and there was a certain fear that just came over her, and she couldn't understand why. And then she saw two beings, a man and a woman, coming at her, but they were floating, and they had their feet towards her as they were heading towards her, but they were pointing at her with their feet first. And she was thinking how fearful and how afraid she was. And the being telepathically told her that, well, we're doing this because we're afraid of you. We're afraid that you're going to attack us. And she saw that their feet weren't really human feet. They had claws on them. They were just clawish. And so she said, in her head she was thinking, like, well, what's with the feet? Why is that? And they told them because we were protecting ourselves. Telepathically, that's what the message was, that they were protecting themselves from her. So that was one thing that was interesting. And then another time, another lady, she told about, I think it was her great-grandfather who had this experience. And it was known throughout her family. I mean, it was passed down from generations because this was an experience that happened in her family. And it took place outside of the urban areas. And so as I was saying, the man was going home. He was in the suburbs. He was on his way home. And this kid who was on the side of the road, and the little kid was crying and was by himself. And he asked the man, he was crying and sobbing. He said, "Could you please, take me back with you? I'm lost." And the guy, to his better judgment, decided that he needed to do that because he didn't want to seem heartless to leave this kid all by himself in the woods, lost. So he took the kid on his back, and this dread started to come onto him as he was walking towards the city. And he looked down, and there was the feet of the kid were two claws. Two claws. And so much fear took over him, so much dread, that he threw the kid off his back, and he started running. And he never looked back And that was a story that he told his kids. And that story just went and passed on from generation to generation. And that was their experience. And the great-granddaughter who wrote about it said that she thinks that it might have something to do with the black eye phenomenon. But she thinks that it might have something to do with that. She thinks that maybe that was a kid that had black eyes, but she wasn't exactly sure. Okay, so then there's also this other story that I read. This is about this girl, this little girl. She, for some reason, had fallen in some biohazard waste. And there was people all around her at the time that it happened. And the people wanted to save her, they wanted to give her a stick, they wanted to take her up, but what happened was that she was already immersed in that. So you couldn't really save her anymore. Her body was, toxic at that time already. And they had to just watch her just drown. They had to watch her just go down and slowly drown in that biohazard. And as they watched her, they said that they saw that her eyes turned black, completely black. It was just when it became black. So that's another incident that this happened, where this little kid originally was supposed to be a normal kid. So, let's see. So there's another incident where this lady, she was headed home. And on the elevator, there was another man that came in beside her. And she noticed that he had completely black eyes. No pupils, just completely two black holes. Two black eyes. Not holes, they were black. There weren't any pupils or no whites. And it freaked her out. So after the incident, she went back to the security guard, and they pulled the tape out because they had they had the cam that recorded the incident. So she wanted to show him who this person was because it really freaked her out, and she's never seen this guy before. And he was in her building. So they pulled the tape out and they reviewed it, they ran it. And what happened was they found out that she was alone and there was nobody with her. She was in the elevator by herself. So that kind of reminds me of the LA incident, the Elijah incident, where she was kind of alone talking to herself and nothing was able to pick up on the cam. But it seemed like she was talking to somebody, right? So that kind of reminds me of that. And okay, so what was I gonna say? So my experience, okay. I was walking in New York. It was around the time when they had the blackout during that time. Before or after, around that time. And I was walking in the middle of the day. It was probably around 3 o'clock. And I was on the street. And there was many people there with me. It was just me. There's a lot of people walking. So they brought daylight. And there was a man standing in front of me. He was really tall. He wasn't a kid. But he was really tall. He was young. And I think he's maybe 6'5" or something, just really tall. And so as I was passing him, he turned around, and so he's now facing me, and he had this survey in front of him. And he looked down at it, so I automatically looked down at it. And he said, "Excuse me, ma'am, can you help me with this? Can you help me, fill out some surveys?" And so I looked at the survey, and it asked for my name, my number, my address, and then it had like just 2 more questions below that, which I didn't really look carefully. But as soon as I saw the number and the address, I just said, no, no thanks. I turned to him and I said, no thanks, as I had eye contact with him at that time. Then I noticed his eyes were completely black, And at the time, my instant thought was, poor dude. What kind of job is he doing with those eyes looking the way they do? And how's he going to get people to sign these surveys looking the way he did, And I thought, whatever disease that he has it must be hard for him. And I felt sorry for him. I thought, what's he doing with this job? And people might not take him well. That's what I thought. And then I completely forgot about the incident after that. I completely don't recall it. And it wasn't until about 5 years later that I started reading about these incidences that would come up, and they call them the BEK kids, BEK children. And then I remember, oh yeah, I think I remember I had something that happened to me that was similar. And then he also did have the same, they said that they would have these symptoms where they would ask if they can come in. And it would be come into your home to use the bathroom, or they could come into your car to give them a ride somewhere, or they can come into your tent. This is just those incidences where they would ask if they could come in. But you always have the right to say no. You can always say thanks, but no thank you. And I just want to share it because when I started to research about it, it really frightened me because all these pictures that they put up. And it was scary the way that they told it and their experiences of it. But I want to say that my experience was not like that. And that I'm thankful for that experience. And I'm thankful because every experience in our life enriches us, and it helps us understand life more, helps us tolerate and love things that we deem fearful, or we deem, far from God, or, the things that we are fearful of. They bring that out in us to show us, oh, you still have a lot of fear in you, And it's not the thing that you need to be afraid of. It's more like, well, you need to notice what's inside of you. That, because things change. Today he's two completely black eyes. Maybe in a couple years they have 6 eyes, They turn into a person with 6 eyes. And, the form changes, but your fears stay the same. Your fears will always be your fears. So it doesn't really matter what's on the outside and what illusions you come across, but whatever that you come across draws out your own fear. And that's more what you need to focus on. So I want to share that part of it, that my experience. And not to take other people's experience and frighten yourself, but to just be open-minded that there are things out there that you don't understand. But it doesn't mean that it has to be a bad experience for you. And everything teaches us great things about ourselves, and it teaches us to love. So, thanks for listening.